They said I should be grateful, that a roof, even one built on silence, was still a kindness. But gratitude doesn't sleep on a pull-out bed or swallow pills in the dark. And the day my son called me a burden, I didn't scream. I packed my suitcase, took the deed, and by sunrise, I was gone. By lunch, they had no home left to speak of. I woke up that morning the same way I had for the past 6 months. Early, stiff, and with a quiet sort of dread I couldn't name out loud. The air was still gray outside, the kind of soft light that makes everything look gentler than it is. My joints were less forgiving these days, especially my back, but I moved slow and steady to the kitchen. Coffee first, always. The good kind I buy in bulk at Costco, dark roast, ground fine, kept in a tin I've had since Reagan was in office. It's a little dented now, like me, but it still does the job. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling walls. That used to comfort me. Now it just reminded me I was the only one up doing anything before sunrise. I pulled the pill bottle from the cabinet, the one with my name sharp in black letters across the label, and counted them out into my palm. 3 white tablets, oval and chalky, one for the heart, one for the bones, and one to trick my nerves into pretending everything was fine. I swallowed them dry, because I didn't feel like waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. By the time the kitchen filled with the smell of roasted beans and quiet heat, I'd already started on breakfast. Scrambled eggs, turkey sausage, toast. Nothing fancy, but enough. I always made extra. Out of habit or obligation, I couldn't say any more. Rick came down the stairs in his usual way. Heavy feet, groaning like the floor was somehow offending him. He didn't say good morning, just muttered something about being late and poured himself orange juice straight into a travel mug without asking if I needed anything from the fridge. "Coffee's fresh," I said, "because that's what I do. Offer." He grunted and waved a hand like that meant something. Then came Tanya, all eyebrows and sleep lines, dressed in one of my old sweatshirts, the one I thought I'd lost 3 months ago. She barely glanced at me as she reached for the almond milk, even though she knew damn well I don't touch the stuff. "Where's the oat bread?" she asked, like I was the pantry manager. "Second shelf, behind the cereal," I answered, and she found it right where I said. No thank you. No good morning. Just a slice slapped into the toaster and more silence. The kids didn't come down. Too early, maybe. Or maybe they'd learned that mornings weren't for talking when you lived in someone else's house, but acted like it was yours. I sat at the small corner of the kitchen table that still felt like mine. The rest had been taken over. By backpacks, by chargers, by papers that no one ever moved. I sipped my coffee slow. My left hand ached, same as always. The pills dulled it, but they didn't erase it. Nothing did. Tanya leaned against the counter and looked around like she was evaluating a rental unit. "I was thinking," she said, like it had just come to her, "maybe we could clear out your sewing room? It's just a lot of clutter in there, and we could use the space." I stared at her. "That's not a sewing room. That's my bedroom." She smiled, tight and practiced. "Right. But you don't really need all that storage, do you?" Rick's friend said we could convert it into a home office/guest space. Airbnb, even I put my mug down. "You want to rent my room to strangers?" Rick walked back in, keys in hand. "It's just a thought, Ma. You've got, what, a twin bed and a dresser in there? You spend most of your time in the kitchen anyway. No one likes to hear the truth about their own child, especially when it's ugly." But it sat in front of me, sipping juice and looking through me like I was drywall. I said nothing. Just stood, picked up my empty plate, and rinsed it in the sink. The sound of the water filled the space their manners didn't. Later that afternoon, Tanya asked if I could move my doctor's appointment again. Rick had a phone interview, and the kids had soccer. "We really need help on Thursdays," she said, stirring soup that I had made. "I mean, you're already retired. It's not like you have to be anywhere." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What was the point? I'd said yes the last dozen times. Said yes to school pickups, yes to late dinners, yes to sleeping on the pullout because Tanya needed space for her yoga mat, yes to my own slow erasure. After dinner, Rick handed me a list of errands, if I felt up to it. No, please. No offer to help. Just gas station receipts and scribbles about dry cleaning and grocery discounts. I took the list, folded it in half, and placed it on the table. No promise I'd do any of it. By nightfall, I was back in my room, or what was left of it. A dresser, a twin bed, a stack of my things boxed and pushed against the wall for later sorting. I sat on the edge of the mattress and took out my pill bottle again. Shook it gently. 3 pills left. 3 days. The same number of days I figured I could take before something inside me cracked loud enough for them to hear it. There's a sound a person makes when they've had enough. I hadn't made it yet. But it was coming, and when it did, I wasn't going to ask for permission to speak. The next day began with the same stiffness in my knees and the same dull ache in my lower back. But something else had shifted. I couldn't name it yet. It wasn't anger. Not fully. Just a quiet, brittle edge under my ribs, like the air had gotten sharper overnight. I moved slower, not from pain, but from calculation. I watched the kitchen like it wasn't mine, like I was scouting enemy territory in a house I'd helped pay for. Tanya was already at the table in her robe, phone in one hand, spoon clinking in a bowl with the other. Rick sat across from her, scrolling through something on his laptop, nodding absently. The kids were upstairs, their footsteps a muffled soundtrack to the house's new rhythm. Busy, indifferent, cluttered. So, I was thinking, Tanya said without looking up, about the guest room again. If we rearranged some of your boxes and moved the twin bed out, we could do a futon or something more modern. People pay good money for cozy spaces, and the extra income could help. Help with what? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Rick answered, still staring at his screen. Mortgage, mostly. Utilities. You know, the usual, I repeated. You mean the mortgage I took over when your hours were cut? The utilities I've been paying out of my pension? He blinked, finally looked up. Ma, it's not like that. We're just trying to build something sustainable. You've got security, Social Security, Medicare, all that. You're covered. We've got kids. Security, I said, tasting the word like spoiled milk. Tanya chimed in. It's just a thought, a practical one. That's the word she always used when she wanted something selfish to sound selfless. Practical. Practical like borrowing my car indefinitely. Practical like reprogramming the thermostat without asking because your old bones can handle 68. I didn't answer. I just stood and rinsed my cup in the sink. Same as always. Later that day, I found a real estate flyer on the coffee table. One of those glossy ones with staged furniture and wide-angle lenses. There were circled listings in pen. Handwriting that wasn't mine. I didn't touch it, just stared until the words blurred. In the evening, Rick had a beer, and Tanya had wine, and the kids were parked in front of the TV. I sat on the armrest of the couch, because no one ever made space for me anymore, and tried to read, but their voices filtered through the pages. She won't go unless we push a little, Tanya whispered. She's comfortable. That's the problem. She's not the problem, Rick said. Then after a pause, she's the obstacle. That word. Obstacle. Like I was a chair in the wrong place. Like I needed to be moved. I went to bed early. Lay awake listening to the pipes groan and the heater cycle on. At some point, I fell asleep. In the morning, I was folding towels in the laundry room when Rick came in. I barely had time to say good morning before he started in. Tanya says you've been tense lately, he said. We're worried about your health. Stress isn't good at your age. I folded a towel in half, then again. I'm not stressed, I said. I'm tired. Well, maybe a change would help. We could look at senior living communities. Some of them have meal plans, transportation. You'd be more comfortable. You mean out of my own home? He sighed. Ma, come on. You know this isn't working. We're not a charity. We've got bills, responsibilities. This isn't permanent. It's been over a year, I said. And I haven't asked you for a thing. He raised his voice, not loud but sharp. You think letting you stay here is free? You think your little pension makes up for the space, the tension? You're taking up. He stopped himself. But not soon enough. The words had already crossed the room and landed in my chest. Then he saw the bottle of my pills sitting on the dryer, where I'd left it earlier. He picked it up, shook it once, and threw it back onto the pile of warm towels like it was trash. You need to stop making this so hard. We're not a damn charity. He left the room. I stood there, one hand still gripping a towel, the other trembling at my side. The smell of fabric softener suddenly made me nauseous. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I folded the rest of the towels, placed them in the basket, and carried them upstairs. On the way, I stopped in my room. I opened the top drawer of my dresser and pulled out the folder with the deed, the insurance papers, and every document they thought I was too old to manage. I sat on the edge of the bed and laid them out one by one. Ownership, authority, proof, 3 pills, 3 days. Tomorrow, I would start packing. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay still, my eyes open to the darkness, the familiar hum of the refrigerator downstairs threading through the floor. I kept thinking about that bottle of pills, the way it clattered onto the towels like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. They thought I'd just sit still, that I'd take it like I always had, whisper a prayer, swallow another apology with my meds, and let them keep rewriting the rules of the house I bought. They didn't know what I had left in me. By 4:30, I was up. My room was cold, the kind of early morning chill that seeps into your joints and reminds you what year it is. I pulled on my thick cardigan, the one with the wooden buttons, and opened the closet slow, careful not to wake the creaky floorboards. I took out the small suitcase I hadn't used since Paul's funeral. It still smelled faintly of cedar from the sachet I'd tucked inside years ago. I didn't pack everything, just the essentials. A week's worth of clothes, my insurance cards, my pill organizer, the envelope with the original deed and the latest county tax receipts, a manila folder with copies of every payment I'd made on this house, including the bank transfer I'd sent when Rick's job fell through and the mortgage nearly defaulted. Let them call it charity. In the bottom of the suitcase, I slipped in the blue ledger book I'd kept quietly for years. It wasn't pretty, just a stitched notebook with faded lines and a cracked spine. But inside was every dollar I'd handed over, every copay I'd covered, every grocery run they never paid back. I didn't plan on showing it to anyone, but I wanted it with me, like a kind of armor. By 5:15, I'd double-checked the zippers, wrapped my medication bottles in a scarf, and slid on the soft-soled shoes that didn't pinch. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even leave a note. What was the point? They never heard me when I spoke anyway. Outside, the sky was still the color of ash. The Uber I'd ordered showed up right on time. A young man, quiet, polite, loaded my suitcase into the trunk and asked if I needed help with the door. I said no, thank you. He didn't ask questions. Just drove. I asked him to take me to the budget motel near the strip mall, the one next to the tire shop, and the old diner that still served real coffee. Not some boutique place or a bed and breakfast. I wasn't here for scenery. I just needed time and silence. At check-in, the clerk asked how many nights. I said 2, for now, paid in cash. She slid a keycard across the counter and said the breakfast was complimentary. I nodded, even though I had no intention of eating the rubber eggs or boxed pastries. I just needed a place with walls that belonged to me, even if only for 48 hours. The room smelled like bleach and something floral that couldn't quite hide the mildew. I didn't mind. It was mine. I set the suitcase down by the foot of the bed and opened the curtains. The window looked out at a concrete wall and a dumpster. Still better than the look Tanya gave me every morning. At 9, I called Janet, the lawyer who helped me after Paul passed. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but her voice was the same, steady, direct, respectful. I told her I needed to revisit my property rights and draft a document revoking any implied residential agreement with Rick and his family. I didn't want confusion. I wanted clarity. She didn't ask why. Just said, "Come in today. I'll fit you in." At 11, I sat in her office, papers spread across her desk like a deck of cards. She read them carefully, made notes. "The title is solely yours," she confirmed. "No joint ownership, no lien, no will specifying shared residence. They have no legal claim to remain if you revoke permission." I nodded. That's what I need to do. Janet pulled out a standard document. Termination of verbal license to occupy premises. Legal, clean, enforceable. We filled it out together. I signed in 3 places. She made copies and handed me a notarized original. "I can have a process server deliver this by end of day," she said. "Do it," I replied. Back in the motel, I placed the documents in a zippered pouch and set them gently into my suitcase. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of doing something that mattered. Something final. Around 4, my phone buzzed. Rick. "Where are you?" "Tanya's freaking out. The kids don't know what's going on. This isn't funny." Then another. "You better not be doing something stupid. Don't burn bridges you can't rebuild." I turned off the phone. At 6, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, TV off, lights dimmed, the day catching up to me. I thought about the last time Rick had made me laugh. I couldn't remember. I thought about the first time Tanya thanked me for dinner. That memory came easier. She'd done it once, 2 years ago, when her sister was visiting and she needed to perform gratitude. I opened the curtain again and watched the parking lot lights flicker on. A couple argued near the vending machine. A boy leaned against the ice machine, smoking something he hoped no one noticed. A world of people passing through, all of them looking for somewhere to belong. Tomorrow I'd go back. Not to talk, not to reason. Just to deliver one last message. The locks would be changed by noon. I arrived just before noon, sitting in the back of another Uber, the same suitcase by my side. The driver didn't say much, and I was grateful. I watched my neighborhood slide past the window, the familiar sidewalks, the tidy hedges, the mailbox I painted with Rick when he was 12. It all looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter. Like it knew something was about to change. When we pulled up in front of the house, the first thing I noticed was that the porch light was still on. Middle of the day, and there it glowed. Wasteful, unnecessary, like everything else they did. I thanked the driver and stepped out, suitcase wheels clicking softly against the pavement. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight up the steps and opened the door with my own key. Inside, the air smelled like reheated pasta and cheap air freshener. A children's show buzzed low from the living room. No one noticed me at first. Then Tanya came into view from the hallway, wearing leggings and a hoodie that wasn't hers. Her face dropped like a curtain. "Oh," she said flatly, "you're back." I didn't answer. I stepped into the house, set my suitcase down, and placed the envelope on the entryway table. Rick appeared next, barefoot, holding a coffee mug he hadn't bothered to rinse out. "Jesus, Ma, you scared us half to death." I tilted my head. "Didn't look like it from your texts." He scratched the back of his neck. "Look, we said some things. You clearly needed space. That's fine. But this disappearing act, come on." I opened the envelope, pulled out the document, and handed it to him. "You've got 48 hours to vacate the premises. The sheriff's department has a copy. You'll receive the formal notice within the day." Rick stared at the paper like it was written in another language. Tanya took it from his hand and scanned it quickly, her eyes narrowing. "What the hell is this?" "Legal revocation of occupancy," I said. "You've been staying here without rent. without a lease, under verbal license. That license is now terminated. You can't just throw us out. Tanya's voice rose. We have children. You should have thought of that, I replied, before you tried to turn my room into a revenue stream. Rick opened his mouth, then closed it. Then he opened it again, grasping. You're not serious. I'm deadly serious. That's when Tanya grabbed her phone. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. It took 20 minutes for the patrol car to show up. 2 officers stepped out. One young, buzz-cut, his vest still stiff. The other older, with creases under his eyes and the look of someone who'd seen it all before. Tanya rushed to meet them on the porch, voice quivering, full of righteous outrage. She's trying to evict us, without notice, without reason. This is elder abuse. She's not well. You have to do something. The older officer looked at her, then at me, standing calmly behind the screen door. Ma'am, he said to me, do you have proof of ownership? I held up the folder, already open. Deed, tax documents, signed notice from my lawyer. The officer flipped through it, nodded once. Thank you. He turned to Tanya. Ma'am, according to these documents, she is the sole legal owner of the home. She's issued a formal revocation of your verbal occupancy. Legally, she's within her rights. But she's kicking out her own son, Tanya snapped. And our kids. This isn't right. The younger officer shifted awkwardly. The older one just looked tired. Ma'am, being unpleasant isn't illegal. If she no longer wishes to have you here, you need to comply. You have 2 days. Rick came out then, his face pale, lips pressed thin. He looked at me like I'd just stabbed him in the chest. You're really doing this? I warned you, I said quietly. You threw my pills. You threw my presents. I'm just returning the favor. Tanya was still arguing when the officers stepped back into their cruiser. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I wheeled my suitcase upstairs, shut the door to my room, and locked it. From the window, I watched Rick pace the driveway on the phone. I knew he was calling anyone who might listen, but it wouldn't change anything. Later that day, the Facebook post went up. Tanya, of course, a selfie with the kids in the background, her eyes wide with orchestrated pain. Sometimes even family turns you out. Please keep us in your prayers. The comments rolled in fast. Sympathy, shock, the usual noise. I waited exactly 47 minutes. Then I posted a single comment. The house is mine. The bills were mine. The decision, finally, is mine too. Some of the commenters deleted their replies. A few messaged me privately. One was Janice from church, who simply wrote, "About damn time." Rick and Tanya packed fast after that. I didn't watch. I didn't help. I sat at the kitchen table, sipped my coffee, and waited for the front door to close. When it did, I walked to it and slid the new deadbolt into place. The locksmith had come that morning, just after sunrise. By the time the sun set, the house was quiet again. Truly quiet. Mine. The silence settled different this time. It didn't feel like absence. It felt like space. Space to breathe, to sit without bracing for footsteps or slammed cabinet doors, or the long, scraping silence of people who made you feel like a burden just by existing. The kids' voices were gone, sure, but so were the sighs, the muttering, the cold looks across the dinner table. I'd taken my first full breath in months, maybe years, and I let it out slow, like I was afraid the air might not be mine for long. I spent the first morning doing nothing, and by nothing I mean absolutely nothing. I didn't make breakfast for anyone but myself. I didn't refill juice boxes or pick up towels. I brewed coffee strong and black, the way I liked it before Tanya brought in her almond milk and stevia packets. I sat at the table with my mug and the newspaper, the actual paper kind, not the one on a screen, and I read every damn article, even the ones about zoning laws and school board elections. In the afternoon, I went into the garage. The light bulb flickered twice before staying on. I hadn't been in there much. Tanya had turned it into a storage pit of plastic bins and half-broken kids' toys. But along the back wall, behind the stroller, no one ever folded right. I found my old trunk, the one Paul and I bought after we got married. It was dusty, but solid. Inside were boxes I hadn't opened in decades. There were letters, real ones, with stamps, yellowed photos of Rick with missing teeth and gap-toothed grins, birthday cards from Paul, always signed with just his name and a tiny hand-drawn heart. One envelope held a clipping from our first mortgage payment, back when we'd scraped together every dime. I sat on the garage floor, legs folded awkwardly, and let it all pour over me. Not sadness exactly, more like confirmation. I had built something. I had mattered. The next day, I called the contractor and scheduled new windows. Energy efficient, easy open, the kind that didn't rattle in the wind. I ordered a lift recliner online, burgundy, with soft velvet arms. Cost me more than I liked, but I didn't care. My comfort was no longer negotiable. I signed up for Meals on Wheels again, even though Tanya used to call it unnecessary. I liked the drivers. I liked the routine. And I liked not having to explain why I didn't feel like cooking. On Thursday, I called Ellen. She'd been my best friend since high school, even though we'd lost touch when Paul got sick, and then Rick moved back in, and everything spiraled into caregiving and house management and just one more favor. Ellen had been checking in every now and then, always gently, always with patience. When I told her I'd kicked them out, she didn't gasp or scold. She laughed. "Took you long enough." I invited her to visit. "Hell," I said, "bring a suitcase. The guest room's finally available." She showed up the next morning with a duffel and 2 bottles of white wine. "I brought the cheap stuff," she said. "We're too old to pretend we can taste the difference." We drank 1 glass each, our meds didn't allow more, and sat on the back porch in old lawn chairs with cracked vinyl. We talked like we used to, about husbands, politics, bad knees, good TV. When the sun dipped behind the trees, I felt something inside me click back into place. That evening, Rick sent a text. "You made your point. Can we talk now like adults?" I didn't answer. The next day, Tanya emailed me a list of things they'd accidentally left behind. I deleted it. Then came the social worker. A knock on the door, soft but insistent. A young woman in khakis and a light blue cardigan, clipboard in hand, badge around her neck. Her smile was polite, a little too polished. "Mrs. Henderson?" she asked. "Yes. We've had a report of potential elder mistreatment. I'd like to ask you a few questions if that's all right." I let her in, offered her water, watched her glance around the house like she was expecting to find chains or empty cupboards. "They called you, didn't they?" I said. She didn't confirm, but she didn't deny it either. She asked about my finances, my health, my medication. She asked if I felt safe. I showed her the documents, the deed, the bills, the court notice. I told her everything, with dates and names and no drama. When she left, she shook my hand. "If you ever need anything," she said, "please reach out." "I will," I said. "But I won't." The door closed behind her. Another lock turned. Another line drawn. That night, Ellen and I watched an old episode of Murder, She Wrote and ate microwave popcorn out of a mixing bowl. My house smelled like lavender fabric softener again. Not Tanya's plug-in scent, but mine, the kind I used to buy from the dollar aisle at CVS. My chair arrived the next morning. The delivery man carried it in with care. He even unwrapped the plastic. When I settled into it that afternoon, the cushions hugged me in all the right places. I stared out the window, watching a pair of squirrels race along the fence line. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like anyone's obligation. The next morning was quiet in the kind of way that felt earned. I woke up without the sound of someone else's footsteps. without a slammed door or a barking demand about cereal or Wi-Fi or schedules. Just light, soft and pale, filtering through the new curtains I'd picked myself. I sat up slow, my joints still stiff, but my mind clear. I didn't reach for my phone right away. I didn't check for texts. I didn't need anyone's voice in my ear before I'd even brushed my teeth. After coffee, I pulled out the folder I'd kept in the hallway cabinet, tucked behind old tax forms and expired coupons. My will. Outdated, untouched, since Paul died. I laid it flat on the kitchen table next to a notepad and a pen. I crossed out names with a steady hand. Rick, Tanya, gone. Not out of cruelty, out of honesty. They'd made their choice. Now I was making mine. Instead, I wrote in the name of my granddaughter, Emma. She was from Rick's first marriage, a girl I hadn't seen in a while but who still sent handwritten cards on my birthday. She was 17 now. Quiet, kind, the only one who ever asked how I was really feeling. And beside her name, I added one more line. To a foundation that provided housing and legal support for older women pushed out of their own homes. Let them call it spite. I called it logic. The notary came at noon, a small woman with sharp eyes and quick hands. She didn't ask why the changes, just nodded and stamped. I paid in cash and tipped her extra for discretion. That afternoon, I cleaned out the last of the closets. I packed up old blankets, winter coats, towels with frayed edges, and drove them to the local shelter. The woman at the counter smiled and said, "This'll help more than you know." I smiled back but didn't explain. Some things didn't need telling. Later that day, Ellen and I walked to the little cafe on the corner, the one I used to pass but never entered, always too busy, too tired, too weighed down by everyone else's needs. We split a piece of lemon pie and drank tea from mismatched mugs. The server called us ladies and offered more cream without being asked. I hadn't felt that visible in years. When we came home, my phone buzzed. Tanya. Of course, her message was short. You destroyed this family. I stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down without answering. It buzzed again. Another from Rick. I didn't bother reading it. I powered the phone off. The sun was setting when I heard the knock. I opened the door and saw him. Lucas, my older grandson, Rick and Tanya's boy. 13, lanky, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and sneakers with the laces dragging. He looked up at me, nervous. Hi, Grandma. I stepped onto the porch. Hi, honey. I'm not supposed to be here, he said quickly. But I wanted to see you. I nodded. I'm glad you did. He dug into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I drew this, he said, at school. They said to draw home, and I drew your house. He opened it. It was crude, penciled fast. But there it was. My front porch, the rose bush I'd planted, and the words, Grandma's house, scrawled across the roof. I miss you, he said. I swallowed hard. I miss you too. He didn't ask to come in, didn't stay long, just handed me the paper, gave me the quickest hug a boy could manage, and ran back down the driveway where someone, probably a friend, waited on a bike. I stood there for a while, holding that paper like it weighed more than the house itself. Later, after Ellen had gone to bed and the house was dark again, I sat in my new chair and stared at the ceiling, thought about how easily you can become invisible, how quickly love turns into obligation, how long I'd let them talk me into thinking I owed them something. But mostly, I thought about Lucas, about the quiet way he'd shown up, not to change anything, just to remind me that not everything had to be broken. Still, I knew better than to believe in fairy tales. Forgiveness, if it came, wouldn't change the locks, wouldn't undo the silence, wouldn't erase the way Rick's voice cracked with rage when he called me an expense, a burden, an obstacle. No, some things once said can't be taken back. Some bridges are meant to burn. I reached over, pulled the fleece blanket over my knees, and turned on the lamp beside me. The warm light filled the room, soft around the edges, like the way Paul used to read beside me before bed. I looked around and realized, not with regret but relief, that I had built something again. This time, just for me. And I didn't need permission to stay.